Hey everybody, welcome back to Rink's Garage, where we're continuing to work on the 610 skid loader. We got the engine in and running, so we just got some final things to button up, like a hydraulic pump, radiator, and a couple other miscellaneous little wiring deals. So see if we can get her finished up. So first thing we're going to work on is this hydraulic pump, which I believe is off in Combine or something. Got it out at Dad's for free. So we're going to try and make that work. I actually did take it into work. Had a guy look at it and just kind of get an idea of what it's going to do. And from what he came up with, it's about a 14 gallon a minute gear pump that can spin up to 3,000 RPMs. So we're going to hook it up direct to the front pulley on the engine at engine speed, so it should run about 2,200 wide open. The original pump on this thing was 11 gallons a minute, so we should be fairly close. It's not, doesn't have as big of ports in it, but we're gonna see if we can make her work. I did pick up a pulley when I was in town, but of course it's the wrong size. I need the one in between. You need a 5-inch, because that's what that is. So I'll have to run in and pick one of them up, but we're going to get her mocked up here and see if we can figure out some hose lengths. So this thing still had the brackets, mounting brackets on it. So I'm going to try and use them because it's got a, kind of an adjustable belt tightener. So I think basically kind of what we're going to be looking at is something like that. We get our width set and then we'll have a little bit of adjustability to tighten the belt like that. So I just need to space this out right to get our belt lined up, get her tacked on, and see what we got. I got a little tube spacer that I measured out, so I'll stick that in there and then we'll tack this on, and it's got a gusset down here we can weld on. So I'll get that tacked up and we'll see what she looks like. Alright, we got her tacked in there. Just eyeballed her, you know. Nothing fancy here, but we'll see when the belt jumps off, then we'll have to fix it then. But next we need to make some hoses. So I got this mounted up. We got a pressure or a supply in and a pressure out. And I think I'm going to run them down underneath that belt and around to the skid loader stuff. You see down there I got some more fittings. So the 45 over here is pressure in, and then that's return. So the bottom one will loop around the corner, and the top one comes up to this other return hose that's here. So I'll do some measuring, write down a list, and we can run into town and get some hoses made. And when I'm in there, I'll pick up a 5-inch pulley to stick on here. And this belt is going to be real close, so I might not even have to buy a belt. We'll see. I do have this much adjustment on the belt tightener, so I'll measure some hoses and run and get them and get her plumbed in and move on from there. And one other thing I did do, got my return, fuel return in there, so I just tapped a hole in the cap and put a 90 on there, so she just dumps the fuel in back in the tank. So we'll get some hoses made. All right, got my hoses, and I did pop the pump off and finished welding it up. So that's on there solid. Got our new pulley on. Appears to be pretty straight. So we'll see. The one thing is, right down there by the oil pan, we have minimal clearance. I can see light through it, so hopefully she doesn't burn that off there. But once we get her going and fire up, we'll have to see what it looks like. But next thing on the agenda is getting the hoses ran, so connect them all, get them all tightened down. Probably have to figure out some way to mount them down here to keep them from getting up, but I'll get them ran in there and then we'll see what it looks like. Got the hydraulic hoses installed, got them routed down low. Do have a hose holder back there to keep from getting up in the belt. Tighten them ones up, and then got a couple zip ties on down there. So next thing is put the alternator back in, which runs off this jack shaft. Probably should put a new one in because this one's old and crusty, but I think it worked before, so we'll stick that in there. Another thing I probably should have done when I had this apart was throw a new belt on it, because she's missing chunks. But it's for another day, I guess, if it comes apart. So I'll throw that back on, throw a battery in it. I did get a new battery. And then let's see, maybe we'll clean it up and see if the hydraulics work before we start on the radiator. Do a quick test, but throw the alternator in there and clean some tools off it and see what happens. Well, I got the alternator in and the battery. The alternator in there, we'll see how long that belt lasts. Got the battery, and I did throw another push button switch. One thing I forgot about before, why she's a little hard starting, for the glow plugs. So it's just got a rail running each glow plug. Just put a somewhat heavy gauge wire on it, and then it's just wired to the battery with 30 amp fuse. So we push that in for 10-15 seconds before we try to start it. Hopefully it works a little better. So next thing we got to do is put some hydraulic oil in it. I don't know how much is in it. It's been sitting around. I know it's low, so luckily I just happen to have a 5-gallon bucket of used hydraulic oil, and they do give you this nice large 1-inch pipe fitting to pour it in. So we'll be pouring it in through this tiny funnel, so that should be fun. I did forget, it does have a plug. It's got 2 plugs, a low level and a high level, so I took the high level one out. So basically we'll just dump her in there and until it starts running out. See how much ends up on the floor. Smallest funnel known to man here. Could be a while. Little arms are getting kind of tired. Be nice if we had enough in here that it started running out, and then I had another gallon or so. So we'll have to fill up them new hoses we put on in the pumps. So. But I don't know how low it was. We're almost empty. Oh, I think I finally got a dribble out of that plug. Right. She's running out. So we're at the full level. Be nice to have another gallon or so in there, but I don't know if I got any more. That bucket's about empty. So she was pretty low because there was about 4 gallons in that bucket, and took all of it to get it up to fill level. All right, well, I did find another bucket. So I put another gallon or so in. So now it's time. I think we'll see if we fire up and let her idle for a little bit and get the oil pushed through the pump. Make sure that belt doesn't fly off. All kinds of stuff. glow plugs for a little while. I think it's gonna work. Hydraulics seem to work. I don't see any major leaks anywhere yet. So it's another good sign. But well, now we can lift and lower and drive. So now all we need is coolant. So next on the agenda, we'll be trying to fit that radiator in there. So not exactly sure what the plan is yet, but see what we can do. Well, before I get to the radiator, I forgot about one other thing is we need a throttle cable and a fuel shutoff. So I went scrounging around and I did find a couple cables. This one is a brake cable off a moped, and I'm not sure what that one's off of, but they got some weird ends. This one's got threaded on one end and one of the little lead ball thingies on it, and this one has a little tiny thing on it and a threaded end on this end. So I think what I'm going to do is use this lead ball end on here. And I scrounged around and I had a bunch of these random little brackets laying around, so I drilled a couple holes in it so we can bolt that on through the existing holes to hold that in, and then I'll just have to redo my bracket to get up here to hold this. And this bracket bolts on 2 bolts, so I think what I'll do is take these off, make up some bracket to hold this, and another one on the bottom, because this of course goes the other way. So we'll figure something out for a bracket and get it bolted on, because that radiator is going to sit right here in front of it. So might as well get her done now. Alright, we got the throttle cable bracket made up on this end. I just cut apart the old one, added in this piece, kept her somewhat in line to keep her stiff. Had a cable clamp holding that throttle cable in place. Got this guy on there, so that end of it should be good. Routed it up to the front here. I'm going to try and use the original throttle handle, which pushed on this cable backwards, so I think what I'm going to do is loop the throttle cable around, come in this way, and try and get this guy off this rod so we can use him to put this end through. But I'm going to have to cut this out of here because it's welded. So cut this out of there and see if I can get her together. Well, got our linkage up. I made a little bracket. Use that other part. So now we got throttleage. Just got to tie it up a little bit. Also ran the other one. Never mind my little handle here. That's fuel shut off with a bent washer. What I did was made another bracket back here. The shut off cable hooked to there. I did throw a return spring on the throttle just so it always came back to idle. So I think we're done in this area. Probably throw a hose on the intake up to the air filter, get that done, and then I think we're ready to mount a radiator. Thinking it's going to sit just probably about this high, come down to here, but throw her up there and see what's going to work the best. Alright, so next on the agenda, water pump. So this is a water pump for like a Volkswagen Beetle or something. It's 12 volt, as you can see. It's finely wired. I don't know, it had some tiny wiring thing, so I had to trim my connectors down and put a bunch of tape on it. Should be fine. Anyway, so we're gonna mount this in here with a hose clamp. I just got an angle iron with a slot in it so we can clamp it right to it. So it'll sit like that. This will be the inlet. So the radiator will sit up here. Water will come out, go in the pump, out of the pump, around the motor, into the engine. So throw that on there, and we're just going to wire this in with the fuel pump. So when you turn the switch on, they both fire up right away. So I'll get this mounted, wired in, then we can go about mounting that radiator. So it's time to mount the radiator. I got her hung up there with zip ties right now. I did get the water pump mounted. And we got a radiator hose inlet going into the engine. I cheaped out on buying the brass barb fittings and bought some of these plastic water fittings. So I don't know what temperature they're good for, but hopefully they don't melt. But got that ran and secured down to the water pump, so all we really got left is from the water pump suction side into the bottom of the radiator. And then of course the top one will go on like so. So I think that's kind of where the radiator is going to be. I was able to drill a couple holes in this, and then I welded another bracket on this side. And then I think I'll just put some spacers in between. 4 bolts ought to hold it. It is going to stick out the back a little bit, but I want to keep enough room to get an electric fan in there. And we're already pretty close to the hydraulic pump with that lower radiator hose. Basically, I'm going to have to come out at a 90, turn this way, and then reduce down to 3/4 to get into our water pump here. So, but get that all mounted, and I think what I'll do is I'll just build a cage. We got these 4 mounting holes back here, so I can just build a cage in case we back into something, because I do have some weights there that go on the back too. So, but get some holes drilled through here, some spacers, and bolt this up solid, and then we can finish hooking up the radiator. I'm gonna have to wait till morning to get some fittings because somehow I shorted myself, so I don't have the right fittings to reduce down on the low radiator hose. So, but we'll get this mounted up tonight, get the top radiator hose on, run into town in the morning, get some more fittings, and should be able to dump some water in it and take her outside, see what happens. Well, it's the next morning. Got the radiator mounted, bolted in. fairly solid. And I got to looking around this morning and I found my other fitting and a 90. So we can finish putting that bottom radiator hose on, stick that in, and then we can pour some water in it, I think. So I'll get that stuck on. We'll see if she'll leak all over the place. Well, moment of truth. Don't mind all the hose clamps, but I got the bottom water pipe in. I did change it up and put the circulation line just under the thermostat and ran it back before the pump so it'll circulate in the engine before it gets too hot. So we'll see if that works. One thing I am missing is my switch for the radiator fan. That'll go in that plug. I'll have to order one. I got the wire here for the relay, and this is just ground, battery power, and keyed power. So I'll hook that up to a relay, and then the switch will just complete the ground when it gets hot enough and turn the fan on. Got the fan in the box there, but I'm thinking it's cool enough outside we ain't gonna need it anyway. It's quite a big radiator than what would have been on this motor, so. But we'll dump some antifreeze in it and see how much runs out on the ground. I got my voltage tester on there because I haven't hooked up my charging wire yet, so I want to make sure that's charging because we're going to need electric fuel pump, electric water pump, fan. We're going to need make sure it charges good. So dump some water in her. I also haven't checked the radiator to see if that leaks, so that wouldn't be good. Pump sounds like it's working. And pump for a while and get the air bubbles out of it. She is flowing a little bit, whatever can go through the little hole in the thermostat. So suppose we'll fire it up and see what happens. looks like it's gonna work. I don't think I got any major leaks. Everything that's coming out here is running over the top. So she's not charging though, so I'll have to look into that. Only gets about 2 volts. So see what's going on there, and then we'll take her outside. Well, got the charging problem figured out. I didn't have the wire hooked up to excite the field, so hooked that up to the starter, so when you start it, it energizes that wire. And she was charging 13 volts, so that's good. But I think it's time to take her outside and see what happens. See how much power it's got for turning. Raise her up and down a couple times. Make sure nothing leaks. So we'll fire her up and try her out. I think she's running out of fuel. Well, it appears we got a couple kinks to work out. I think she was running out of fuel. One, probably due to that there's only a gallon and a half of fuel in it sloshing around, or she might have sucked some air. And the other thing, I never did change out this filter, so I'm sure that's plugged. But it seemed like when you were working it real hard, it just starved it on fuel and died. It'd always start right back up, so not too worried about that. Other than that, works good. The speed's good, about kind of where I want it to be. It's not too slow, but it's still got enough power to turn out on the hard dirt pretty decent. So one other thing I noticed when I backed out, we got a bit of a spillage right there from the cylinder that leaks. I forgot that leaked, so maybe look into that too. But otherwise, all we got left is we'll throw a seat on it, which I got right there. It's off a lawnmower, real nice. Throw a seat on it. Of course, we got to build a cage for the back. Basically, I'll just make something that bolts onto them 4 bolts. Comes out, protects the radiator. Radiator fan, of course. I'll have to order that fan switch. Got my wiring there, so basically I just have to bolt the fan on. Wire it in. But I think she's going to work good for what I'm going to use it for, so Next on the agenda for this thing is maybe get a cab on it. Now I got a liquid cooled engine, so I could put a heater in it, but there's not a lot of room there. They did make cabs for them. I'm gonna see if I can find one of them, but either we just build one. I don't know. We'll see. But that's gonna do it for this video. So thanks for watching. See you next time.